elsewhere. You said so. For instance, you said, it's not for failed male athletes, whatever age. This is not right and it's not fair. This to you is a question of morality, isn't it? It's about justice. And as you cast it, it's about being fair to women who are participating.
Men are losing at women's sports. It's a beautiful thing by way of them not being able to play anymore. Tennis great Martina Navratilova speaks up in a big way. Welcome back to the JP Reacts channel, my beautiful freedom-loving friend. This is where we call out lies, hypocrisy, corruption, and help spread the light of truth and freedom, because truth conquers. Boy, we didn't know it was true all along that men in women's sports were actually men. And now we're just figuring it out. We knew all along. But the cool thing is, I think men in women's sports are losing. Not when they're competing. When they're competing, they're typically beat the crap out of the women. Just like the Minnesota guy softball pitcher wins a state title. Nobody can hit his pitches in women's high school softball. But they are losing by way of losing their opportunity to take opportunities from women in women's sports. The tennis great Martina Navratilova has been speaking out on behalf of women against men in women's sports in a big way lately. We'll see a clip from her. Also, something cool happening with Riley Gaines we'll share with you in a second. But first, let's take a look at some polls from the mainstream. So you'd think the mainstream would try to skew the polls like, no, most people want men to be, they say they're women. So they want these men that say they're women to be able to compete in women's sports. But take a look at this. These polls are all from 2025, and they show the overwhelming majority of Americans do not want men competing in women's sports. New York Times poll, 79% opposed to, they say trans women in women's, we say men in women's sports. The Gallup poll, 69% are opposed to men in women's sports. Pew Research, 66 are opposed to men in women's sports. And NBC News, 75% are opposed to men competing in women's sports. This is 2025. If this was back in 2020, which I think was peak wokeness, it was the most vicious, and woke is nothing more than political correctness on rabies. What would the poll numbers have been? I would guess they would be the opposite, because most people were too scared to say the truth. And some people were just naive and they didn't know, like, you know, I didn't have a chance to think yet. Like, these women in dresses with testicles, they're actually not women. So this is a major shift. Do we have more work to do on behalf of women? And more importantly, in the name of truth and upholding truth and letting truth set us free? Yes, we do have more work, yet it's worth celebrating. This is a major shift, major victories. And another victory, Riley Gaines posted this. Riley Gaines, you probably know of her. She was the fastest collegiate female swimmer in America for quite a while, and she would finish second to a man, Leah Thomas. How you doing? So Riley Gaines posts this. The U.S. Department of Education has found California in violation of Title IX for letting males compete in girls' sports. They're also in violation of Trump's executive order that says it will withdraw funding from public institutions if they let men compete in women's sports. CIF must restore records, titles, and awards to female athletes and send apology letters to every girl robbed by this discrimination. This is fantastic, it says. So Gavin Newsom, who, you know, he's Mr. California. He's like, let the guys compete with the girls, you know, which for equality, for women's rights, let the guys compete. In California, all people have the right to women's rights. And then the Secretary of Education, as Vince McMahon's wife, fun fact, Linda McMahon, appointed by Trump. If you want to see a sick documentary, watch, was it Mr. McMahon on Netflix? I think her husband's a sick individual, but nonetheless, she did well with upholding this. Speaking of how much men are losing the right to compete in women's sports, you might remember about a month ago, Riley Gaines, speaking of her and Simone Biles, the gymnast who quit the Olympics and was celebrated for it. Cool. That's good values to instill on America's young. They got into a big Twitter feud. Simone Biles was going at Riley Gaines because Riley Gaines said, hey, this Minnesota softball team that won the state championship with a male pitcher, that's not right. And Simone Biles comes out, insults her. They go back and forth. Riley Gaines had ground to stand on. Simone Biles was just trying to virtue signal, but got called out in a major way. The whole internet ratioed it. And guess what? Simone Biles has deleted her Twitter account. We can only imagine she did in shame over just being a principle-less person, still trying to stand up for men competing in women's sports. But guess what, Simone Biles? Even if you don't stand for anything, which it sounds like you don't, you're just wanting to say the thing that gets you virtue signaling points and more popularity. Simone, you gotta read the room, because guess what room you're standing in? A room, according to the New York Times poll, that's almost 80% against what you are virtue signaling for. That almost makes it not a virtue signal anymore. It makes it like a mental illness signal. For this video alone, I got a quote from President Trump. I asked him, what do you think about boys who are competing in girls' sports?
They don't know what the they're doing.
And that explains it. Now, let's pick up where we left off with the opening clip.
As you cast it, it's about being fair to women who are participating.
Absolutely. And that there's a certain stepladder that you have to go through before you get to elite sports. So it starts really in high school. And then you come out to go into your local meet, and there's a boy that now has a ponytail and nail polish and identifies as a girl.
Well, that sounds like a girl, doesn't it? He went to the trouble of getting a ponytail and, for crying out loud, painted his nails. That's all you need to do to be a girl, right?
That's all fine and well, but the ponytail and nail polish does not a female make. And now these girls are like, I can't compete against that. I have no chance.
What do you think about where tennis has got to? Because the WTA permits transgender women to participate if A...
So this is why she's speaking out, because whatever that professional tennis association is, they still let men compete against the women. But here's their qualifications.
And signed declaration that they are female or non-binary.
Almost like they would lie on that. Did you sign the declaration that says you're a female? Yeah, I signed it. I signed it good. We'll get back to the video in just a second, but first, you probably know you can't truly be free unless you are in control of your health. And a huge part of that has to do with the nutrients that you're eating. For the longest time, I thought I was getting all the nutrients I needed from my good, clean, organic food. Lots of meat, lots of fat, some clean carbs. But I was wrong. I was missing the most nutrient-dense source of food on the planet: grass-fed beef liver. It is absolutely no secret that organ meats are incredibly nutrient dense, especially liver. And I was missing out. But here's the problem for me. I think eating liver is disgusting. I didn't grow up eating liver. I've tried raw liver. I think that's kind of gross. I've tried cooked liver. I think that's even more disgusting. But the good news is that problem was solved when I found Ancestral Supplements beef liver. It is the easiest, most pleasant, most affordable way to get grass-fed beef liver into your life. I've been using Ancestral Supplements grass-fed beef liver for years now, and I never miss a day. It's a very effective way to get most of your vitamins and minerals in, like vitamin A, B12, vitamin K, iron. And because this is real food, your body can absorb most of it, unlike synthetic vitamins and minerals that don't actually come from food. It keeps your metabolism fast, energy high, and cravings for crap low. Don't let the hassle of cooking liver every day or its unpleasantness prevent you from fully taking control of your health with nature's multivitamin. Get your Ancestral Supplements grass-fed beef liver at ancestralsupplements.com/JPReacts. And this one's mine, but when you get yours, also use promo code JPReacts to save yourself 15%. Now back to the video.
B, their testosterone levels are below a certain limit for 2 years, and C, they sustain those levels. What do you think about that position that the WTA's got to?
I think it's wrong.
She goes on to make a really good point here that doesn't get brought up enough.
I think it's still wrong because, number one, you don't lose the 5 inches of built-in height. Average male is 5 inches taller than a female. Then you
can tell she's European. It's like 5 inches, give or take.
Add arm length, you got like 7 inches. You got this much height.
Now, when you're thinking about tennis or volleyball, a sport like that, you just think, okay, guys competing against girls, that's not fair. But if you pretend it is fair, on average, guys are taller, therefore they'll also have a longer wingspan, longer arms. So if it's tennis or volleyball, you just realize they will be generating more power. Even if they're just a weak guy, testosterone super low, or say their bench press is equal to that of the competing female, they'll still be able to generate more power on the ball because they have more leverage due to the longer limbs. And that might be an unfair advantage and potentially a dangerous advantage. There was a high school volleyball player. She went into a coma after having a male spike the ball in her face. Wonder if she has an opinion on that.
Just here. So I have to jump this much higher for an overhead as the guy, identifies as a woman,
It's a guy.
to be on the same level.
Recently in the UK, the Supreme Court ruled that the legal definition of a woman is based on biological sex.
I am shocked the UK ruled that. Not because it's just obviously true. Why was that even in the court in the first place? But the UK has gotten severely woke, arresting people for free speech. So I'm surprised they upheld what is just actual obvious truth about what a female is.
Is your message to the world of tennis that they should follow the lead of the UK Supreme Court and be that clear and that definitive?
100%. I think sports has always been on the front of social change and social progress.
I don't know if that's true. Like, a lot of people pay attention to it, but how are sports at the front? I'm just disagreeing with her. I like her principled point here. Like, just let women's sports be for women, but sports being at the forefront of social change, like, I don't know, is like the NFL, like, writing "Don't be racist" in the end zone. Like, is that end race? Did that do anything to racism? I don't know about that.
This way, we can be on it again in affirming the right of women and girls to sex-based spaces.
Let me just
and being in the right side of history.
Let me just
It has
push
to
back
be
for
that.
one moment.
Do this British dude. Let me just push back on you there for a moment. Like, it's literally a man talking to a professional athlete woman. She's retired now. And he is making a case for men to be in women's sports. I just want to point out, like, that's the scenario right here. Do you think the female should be making the case for who should compete in women's sports, buddy? It's like, no. Let me make a case for why I should make a case.
One consequence of your taking those views might be that people who are trans, who've been through terrible experiences many times, will face more public persecution, and they're already terribly persecuted.
I will start answering that question for Martina. If a trans person is facing public persecution, it's because they did something publicly that was not aligned with cultural values, morality, or objective truth. And that's what public persecution is for. It's to shine the light and call out impurities. Now, if a straight hetero person is being publicly persecuted, that's because they did something, or at least were accused of doing something that's not aligned with cultural values, moralities, the laws, or objective truth. And I would guess there's a lot of trans people that, guess what? They are not, and I do mean they, are not being publicly persecuted because they live their lives in private, which is the best way for any of us to live our lives, says me, who's a public figure. But I keep my private life private.
And that actually we should all, including you, spend a bit more time being sympathetic to what people who've gone through that process, who've transitioned, are experiencing.
Yeah, I'll answer that as well before we hear her answer. Someone's gone through public persecution. Let's just say they've had a hard life. Weaponized morality would want you to be sympathetic to them. In other words, destroy truth. Be a pushover. Allow your rights to be violated. Allow truth to be violated because they've had a hard life. You want to be sympathetic, don't you? You know, good people are sympathetic. Shouldn't you have more sympathy? It's like, well, no, truth is truth. I'm sorry they've had a hard life. Not all have. Some have. And I'm not going to blanket that, throw everybody under the victim blanket. That's for them to do, not me.
He's sympathetic, but that still doesn't give him right into women's sex-based spaces.
Yeah, that math adds up. Yeah, you can be sympathetic, or you can actually just mind your own business and not care. But it doesn't give them the right to women's spaces.
What about the women? What about the girls? Every athlete affects every girl on that pitch, on that playing field.
Now, hats off to her because she's, of course, someone who's built up a huge reputation. She puts it on the line. I think she's like super Trump derangement syndrome. Yet she sees the obvious truth in this situation. And on behalf of women, if I may speak for them, and clearly I can, I appreciate Martina Navratilova speaking up, putting herself on the line for potentially facing public persecution for standing for the truth. Now, before we end this video on how men are losing at women's sports finally, this just in from Planned Parenthood. It's Men's Health Month. All right, go on, Planned Parenthood. And that means highlighting the health needs of all men. Trans men are men and need cervical cancer screenings too. By the way, 90% of men think you're talking about the neck. 90% of men don't know they don't know there's a cervical in the genitalia area. If you're a guy who knows what the cervix is, let alone you are screening your cervix, those are two powerful clues that you are not a man and you are in fact a woman. But the post goes on. Here are some ways to make cervical cancer screenings more comfortable. And it eventually it goes on about it just involves women's anatomy. By the way, shout out Planned Parenthood, whoever your copywriter is. I can tell that you don't believe that men with cervixes are men. I can tell you don't believe that trans men are men because you're showing your hand. The second line here, trans men are men. You're just hitting it really hard on the nose there. If you really believed it, you would just speak about it naturally, effortlessly, without trying to prove. You'd just say, trans men need cervical cancer screenings. But they're like, trans men are men, and they need cervical cancer screenings. Planned Parenthood, I hope Satan's paying you well. Anyway, let me know what you think about how men really seem to be losing at their ability to compete in women's sports in the comments. And I'll look forward to seeing you in our next video. But until then, stay free.